What's up, guys? It's just me and Gov here, and we got a really cool idea. Comic-Con just happened, and all this controversy is happening around sports. I'm like, how can we marriage the two ideas in like a fun, kind of comprehensive way where we can still learn something about fantasy sports, about sports in general and culture, and we have a really cool idea. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to name a sport, and then Gov's going to name a sport, and then we're going to flip flop. And the notion is that we can learn something from each sport. So, how do we improve each sport as we kind of look into different teams off seasons and different sports off seasons? Because, I got this idea because golf right now is going through this transitional standpoint where it's like, are you on this fence with the PGA or are you on the side of live golf? And it's like, well, if you're a golf fan, you can just appreciate both sports, right? Or you can dislike something about one sport and also, still enjoy the players that play in it or that kind of thing. So I thought this would be a cool exercise of how companies and how sports kind of blend together, and it would allow me to go talk some fantasy sports and just like the industry as a whole. But before we start, Gov, I want to mention to the people that I'm starting my own Substack. And I decided to put a value tier on it. It's not to become rich and famous as much as it is. I feel like, and this will tie back to our topic today, I feel like to value yourself and to value your time and to improve, you need to set a baseline. Like, I can't give away something for free and then tell you I'm valuable or there's value behind it. So I'm not doing this to get rich and famous or tell you that you need to do this. This is just a secondary alternative that you can do to support the show. The show is still going to stay free. We still welcome all the viewers in the comments and anything like this is just basically a bonus content. This is a growth movement, and if nothing comes of it, nothing needs to come of it right away. So I just want to get that out there. So this content is going to be based on my two passions, which is emotional stuff. So emotional stories, uplifting stories, and sports, and then how it connects to sports and activities. So I think you guys will enjoy it a lot. I might even venture off and do some Netflix recommendations, some culture stuff, but I got some big kind of journalistic ideas around some ideas that I can do. So I'm going to put a lot of time and thought into this idea. Gov, do you want to tell the people any kind of headlines, anything going on in your life that you got to get off your chest before we get started?
Oh, no, nothing basically new, just grinding DFS every day, working hard. Ready for a podcast, actually.
Well, that would be a fun, easy, jumping point for you. What is your favorite draft? What is your favorite daily fantasy platform?
I guess I prefer DK. I prefer DraftKings.
Okay.
That would be my preferred one. I've never really liked FanDuel much. I'm not even sure what their interface and everything is not that much different, but I've never really liked FanDuel. Yahoo is kind of like FanDuel in the way they built their stuff. And again, I wasn't really a big fan. I don't know. I just sort of I got good with DraftKings. I won early on DraftKings, so I stuck with them.
So it is that brand loyalty, though. So,
see, I could see a point where I get big enough of a bankroll where I will need to diversify, and I'll have to start getting some FanDuel or some Yahoo or something else going. But I kind of hope that I'll be in a legal state where that can just be regular sports betting.
Yeah, I think
instead of another DFS site, it'll be more like money I have with one of those, like a Caesars or MGM or something like that.
Well, to connect with you, I mean that's even weirdly happening to me, where it's sports betting is legal in Michigan, but a lot of these India casinos are getting mad about sports betting being legal in Michigan that they're trying to basically red tape the situation, and so they're making it so people that run these best ball contests in smaller, more niche kind of contests and communities are having a hard time paying the gambling fee. So I can't play underdog right now. But I can sports bet. But because of sports betting, that's the reason they came down on a site like Underdog or even Yahoo. It won't let me participate in a lot of their bets currently. So, what could FanDuel learn from DraftKings as we transition to our topic that would make you want to play there more outside of the obvious that you just mentioned?
See, that's weird. Like I said, I probably would be playing on FanDuel if I needed or wanted to get more money in that. So I think FanDuel and DraftKings do things pretty similarly. I don't think they're doing anything wrong. I'm just not a player that's going to be on multiple platforms at this time.
So how would you improve FanDuel?
I don't know if I could improve. Anything I would do to improve FanDuel would also be something DK could do to improve their interface, to improve their thing.
You just think DK?
I think both of those sites are about even, and if I don't need to play on both, I'm only going to play on the one that I basically got on first.
And so, it's just what you're familiar with.
Right. The one I got into first that I won the most on early.
Right.
That's the one I'm still playing on.
I appreciate that.
That easily could have been FanDuel.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't know if you guys have started the new show The Bear that's on Hulu, but one of the biggest, I won't really give anything away, but the show kind of starts with this local guy who gets his culinary degree, and he comes back to his local neighborhood, right? And he wants to take over the family business, and one of the applicants that ends up applying to his business is a young African woman who applies to work for his restaurant because her and her father had went there when she was a child. So even though she was more qualified for a different position, perhaps, she went to what she knew. And so I do think there is some brand loyalty that goes there. You're not saying that DraftKings does everything perfectly, that they're even the best pizza, to use that analogy, in town. You're just saying, hey, this is close to my home, this is close to my radius, and I'm comfortable here. I think there is something to be said for that. And DraftKings, well, not DraftKings, in daily fantasy sports, and just sports in general, and maybe even a life lesson, talking about emotional stuff and tying it all together. So let's go ahead and do this, Gov. You give me a sport, and I'll give you a secondary sport, and then we'll kind of bounce ideas off of that and try to fix both sports at the same time.
Okay, well, if we're going to try to fix a sport, I'll start with one that I think needs fixing. So my first sport would be baseball.
Okay. The first one that came to my mind was the Olympics. So let's talk about baseball and the Olympics.
I think, honestly, just right off of that, if baseball could somehow become the first true international sport that's not just an American sport, that might be the best thing to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, winning the World Series, you play in Toronto, and otherwise it's the United States the entire time. But I think baseball has enough. I've seen the Korean leagues, I've seen the Dominican leagues. I think if you could somehow get it in Europe or Asia, or more in Asia or in Europe, you could get a really good international. Maybe it's something where baseball now becomes the first international sport. So now it's a 2-year sport to do a championship. Kind of like how the Olympics is every 4 years. Well, now it takes 2 years to crown a title because you have to play enough games across the entire world plus a playoff.
Kind of like the World Cup for both sports then?
Essentially, yeah. So you'll have a year of teams playing each other in qualifier matches and exhibition matches. And then that will allow them to qualify their rank in a 32-man tournament, kind of like March Madness.
Yeah.
You can even have them set up their own leagues where it's like in football. The winner of the league is an automatic in. and then the rest of them are vying for qualifying position behind the top seeds.
Yeah.
That could work. That would actually, like, taking that from international sports in the Olympics would really help baseball, because I think baseball gets too stagnant being the same 30 teams it's been for so long in the same cities, and you need new faces. So it's definitely popular enough around the world. I think it could be the first one to do that. Basketball would be the other one to do that, but I think baseball could.
Speaking on that, though, as you were kind of formulating your thoughts, and the thing is I don't really want us to like have too much prep in this, because I almost want us to act like commissioners here and be put on the spot in a press conference like scenario where it's like, how would you? This is your first day on the job. You just fastened your tie. How do you fix the sport? Not
exactly.
So
like, yeah, and we haven't planned any of this. Like, I just named a sport. I didn't know you were going to say the Olympics after baseball. You didn't know I was going to start with baseball. But I took 1 second. I'm like, okay, Olympics. What would I like for the Olympics to do? What would I like baseball to do that the Olympics does? I'd love it to be an international sport. I would love for it to be bigger. Even if you had to expand it to multi-year for a season. Even if you had to make, but now we're kind of making it more like, even then we started grafting, like, now I'm making it more like the college sports that are international. Now I'm making it more like soccer and the World Cup, more of the international sports.
Well, one of the biggest things that I know my ex-girlfriend, who didn't really care about sports, really enjoyed about the Olympics, was the kind of thing that you were speaking about. It was like countries against countries. It was that they were on at different times of the evening. It was that, like, there was fireworks and ceremonies and
well, it's one thing to have the fandom, to be a fanatic and a fan of a team. Now you're extrapolating that to nationalism and national pride.
Right.
Now it's not just being a fan of a team. Do you support America? Do you support Brazil? Yeah, that's a very large thing that a lot of people can get behind, even if you're not really into sports.
Well, that was.
I could see Japan being behind the Japanese baseball team if they got into the tournament, even if Japan themselves is more into anime and other stuff than they are into baseball. They will get behind their baseball team. We know China will throw a 1 billion man freaking like parade behind the Chinese baseball team if they get the chance.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's a lot of different marketplaces that go underutilized in a sport like baseball that's kind of like perceived as like this tobacco spitting, corn chewing sport, when it's like, no, there's a lot of international flavor, It's huge in the Dominican Republic. It's huge in these Asian community markets. Just like golf kind of has that same pull. Look at a guy like Hideki Matsuyama is like the Michael Jordan of the Asian community, over there. Like, so there is that national pride. And I would say I would lean into that if I was baseball or the Olympics, even more than they already do. And to extend that is, why doesn't baseball welcome more female involvement in their sport in this sense? It's like, people, why don't you involve some kind of softball element? Why don't you involve Jenny Finch the way we do with soccer, like with the World Cup? There's the Women's World Cup, and then there's the men's. And like the UFC does this very well, where they'll blend a card with like females and males. And when you talk about that nationality, I think like it's easier for a person like my ex-girlfriend to follow that sport than, because it's like she doesn't have to worry about like, oh, does Jenny Finch still play? Does Hope Solo, could she pick up a bat? It's like, no, she plays for America. He's playing for, Brazil, like you mentioned. So I think those would be the two things I would recommend for those two sports to kind of grow the game.
I have no disagreement with that, actually.
Gabo, what you named it? No.
No, you go first now.
I go first now. So let's go. Let's go with a controversial one, just to prove that we're not afraid to go controversial. Let's go with Live Golf.
If I want to make Live Golf better, what sport do I look at to help? Well, probably the UFC. I would probably have to go with that or professional wrestling, because those is the ones where you're dealing with a lot of independent contractor, single, like it's not teams, it's not agents and corporate, like it's golfers representing themselves and going and playing that stuff.
And whether you agree with it or not, I think there is a lot of parallel between Greg Norman and Dana White.
I'm not going to try to disagree with that. I probably could, but I'm not going to.
I'm not saying like they align politically.
No, I know. No, I get what you're saying though, but
But they're both kind of like, I think they're both perceived a certain way, but they both provide so much different connectors that people don't realize. Like, because they look or sound or even provocatively present themselves in a way, like Dana White, for example, doesn't wear a lot of suits. You'll never really see Dana White wearing a lot of suits all the time. Like Roger Goodell, like if he's getting casual, it's still like a sweater over a couch kind of scenario. Where like Dana White looks uncomfortable as hell sometimes in a suit. And like there is a charm to that. And like Jay Monahan with the PGA is like trying to be all prim and proper, where like Greg Norman will wear his Crocodile Dundee hat and he'll like embrace the volatility of situations. And like we can get into the political nature of things, but like, or we cannot. That's up to you whether you want to touch on that or not. What I would say is, no matter what you think politically or indifferent, or you're entitled to those opinions, just know like if you dig deep enough into any sport, into any entertainment source, you're gonna hit a waterman break at some point. Yes, some are more pure than others. Like the Special Olympics is probably way more pure than like the NBA with their China market. It's just a fact. And that's just an example, Subway, might be more pure than like a really nasty like Chinese restaurant that sells like cocaine locally. Like you never know. What I'm saying is you never know exactly what you're getting, unless you really want to know that kind of thing. And like, so you could pick apart almost any scenario. But we're just talking about the sport in general. I just think
go on.
Well, Live Golf should be what they are. They should be the alternative. They should be the outcast. Like, I don't know if you know this, but at their next event, they are going to have concerts now. They're going to have a Super Bowl performance every week going forward at their events. And some people think that's Bush League, but it's like, if that's what they want to do to be different, then they're embracing the circus. I would rather them embrace the circus like the UFC did.
That's what I was going to say. Like when the UFC first started, like there was professional fighting, but it was underground and it was seedy and it wasn't advertised greatly. Like if it was at all, it was not in the best light. And so they sort of embraced that side of them while also trying to give you the good spin on it and show how the fighters are enjoying themselves and everything about that. And that helped grow that sport.
But
to the point where there were other ones, like it became the UFC, and then there's also Bellator, and also like there were other bigger fighting things.
There's the PFL that also ESPN supports, is Invicta, which is a women's base. But these things wouldn't have been possible had they not embraced the carnival atmosphere of it and made some kind of headway, even if it is just attention. People like Live Golf, for example, is experimenting with Charles Barkley he might be going over there in the next couple days. And it's like, well, what the hell does Charles Barkley know about golf? And it's like, well, Charles Barkley probably plays more golf than some PGA announcers do at this point. Does that mean he's as good as them? Does that mean he's as knowledgeable as them?
No. But as a professional athlete, he'll also have that perspective of,
Right.
I ain't anywhere on these guys' level. I just play golf every day I just play golf like an idiot every day.
Right. And to tie that back to fighting is, I know like a lot of fighters will go through like psychological evaluations before fights. Like it's almost supported and appreciated by Dana White to like go see a sports psychologist and stuff like that. These are small little niches that people think like, oh, human cockfighting, or they think one way, but it's like, no, Dana White, because it's perceived as so violent, it's actually, these people are a lot more human than you realize. Like after a fight, for example, they get the microphone and they get to pretty much say whatever they want. And you guys might know this kid named Patty Pimblett had a relationship with a 4-year-old girl a month. So a month into his training, he found out she passed away from cancer. And then 12 hours before he was to fight, he found out his friend committed suicide. So when he won his fight, Gov, he used his platform to talk about how men should talk about suicide prevention and how he would rather his friend have cried on his shoulder and like got over that stigma than him having to cry over it in a week's time at a funeral and a casket. And like, but people wouldn't know these stories because there are still some people like John McCain who think it's human cockfighting.
Exactly. And I think that's what Liv needs to do. Like everyone's thinking right now that these are just the golfers going over for the money grab. Mm-hmm. This is all the money play. They're going to the Saudis for the huge cash. They don't care about the integrity of the golf and playing in the tournaments that they like and the courses that the golfers like. No, it's not that. They're like, yes, they're going for more money, but there's other things they're going for. And if the league can show off those things that the other golfers are enjoying and playing for, maybe they love the different rounds where it's like, well, now I don't have to worry about having a shit day on Thursday and not even getting to play golf on Saturday and Sunday.
Correct. They don't play till Fridays.
And there's no cut. So you play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's like, cool, I can actually plan a weekend as opposed to like, what if something shitty happens and now I have nothing? What, am I going to sit there and watch other people play golf on Saturday, Sunday? No, I'm going to go to another course and play because that's what I do. Right. But now you don't have to worry about that. You're just in this tournament and see how good you can actually do in 3 days.
Well, similar to baseball. I mean, that was back in the early 90s, late 80s. They would talk about baseball would really attack the NFL because they were more available to kids than, the NFL was, because the NFL wanted that like marquee primetime spot. And it's not to say one is better than the other. It's just like when you have day baseball, that is going to affect, that is going to be more affordable or more appealing to a family during a summer vacation than maybe a like 9 o'clock, Monday night football game. It's not to say one is better than the other. It's just they're going to attract different audiences. And it's like if you're a young up-and-coming WWE superstar and you get the opportunity to wrestle and make a name for yourself, that opportunity might come in Abu Dhabi. It might come in one of these, F1 kind of events where it's like, oh, this is kind of a seedy place to be at, but this is where I have to be right now to get this opportunity to like. Bryson DeChambeau, for example, was very open and honest about how much money he made, which is a ton of money, but that's not the point, so I'm not even going to bring it up. But he donated a bunch of that money to kidney research hospitals because he was personally affected by it within his family. So it's like, we can't just say like, oh, it's dirty money, and then that's a blanket statement, because some some blankets are meant to be quilts and some are meant to be comforters, and like to try to put us all in one box, I think is unfair. I would say that.
I agree with that.
So let's go on to another sport. Let's go with.
Hold on, my move first. Remember? All right.
Sorry,
I know you're getting out of order. You're good, man. You're good, man. Okay. Let's see. What's a sport I'd like to? How do we make hockey better?
Okay, I'm gonna throw you a curveball, but it's still sports related, so I think you'll appreciate it. How do we improve hockey with underdog fantasy sports?
Ooh, see, hockey fantasy was never my big thing. I was playing a little bit of it, but like,
so I'm wondering
yeah.
if we did like a best ball hockey, or you did like a different version, like Jack Market or like a props, like how do we fix hockey with not DraftKings or FanDuel or these bigger ones, but how do we use like a smaller niche fantasy sports site like Underdog, like Prize Picks, to fix hockey?
Let's see. I don't know. I mean, a daily hockey like building line. Let's see.
I think this is interesting because neither.
This is interesting. Yeah, I don't have an answer off the top of my head, but I want one.
And I don't play a lot of fantasy hockey, or probably hockey is my least favorite sport, which is funny because I am from Michigan. So like you would think I'm a huge Red Wings guy because they've been the most consistent like winning team probably in Michigan outside of like our amateurs, like our collegians. Like they're probably the best professional sport in Michigan out in the professional ranks. And I just never got into hockey. But good boy, you think about it, it might be because I'm a huge food guy, and so I thought throwing the octopuses on the ice was just such a good waste of food. But hey, man, that's just me. You got an answer for the people yet?
I'm trying. Like, it is racking my brain because, like, again, I was playing hockey, but I stopped because, well, I got to the point where my bankroll hit my hockey bankroll hit the red line. It's like, okay, I'll try again next year, but I don't have the bankroll to throw over to keep going. This has been way too unprofitable. And like, I'm trying to take a step back because like, it's not what I would like hockey to do for me to be more profitable playing it. It's what I would like hockey to do to be a more popular fantasy sport in general. I think one of the biggest problems is hockey is one of the few sports that hasn't yet embraced, like, the few games I saw, I don't remember a lot of DraftKings like advertisement. I don't think, like, unlike football and NBA and baseball, because there's been baseball Rooster League. That's really where fantasy sports started, in my opinion, was Rooster League baseball in the early 90s and 80s. People pulling the stats out of the newspaper and collecting it for their own 12-man group at work that they would keep for years.
I'll be willing to ask a stupid question. Is there best ball for hockey?
I believe I think Underdog actually did have. I'm not sure if they did actually, though. I think they may have only done it for baseball, football, and. But something tells me they did because they did it for PGA too. So they might have had some best ball drafts for hockey at the beginning of the season.
Like I say, it's actually illegal in my state right now, so I can't actually look. That's why.
See, that's the other thing. It's like they're not embracing it, which is not helping it become legal. Where everyone from every play, like I know they like shut it down in Canada, so then a huge portion of the hockey population that watches hockey couldn't even do fantasy sports on it. So it's like hockey's just not accessible enough where it needs to be more accessible to take off as a fantasy sport. And it needs to learn, like all the other major sports, they've embraced, even if they didn't want to embrace gambling straight up, they've embraced fantasy because it's like, hey, everyone has a fantasy league. Your mom and pop, you have a fantasy league with your brother and sister and mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a family link thing. It's not a gambling thing. Sometimes you do it just for pride and just be like, hey. now you have another reason to watch the game because I'm rooting on this player. And then it's like, I think it's a good thing. It's also sort of player empowerment. It's like, okay, so we're not going to be advertising teams anymore. We're going to focus on fantasy, and everyone's going to focus on specific players that they want. Now, has that kind of snowballed into players really demanding more money based on their stats and whether or not they can put up stats?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So, like, if it's not the best ball angle, which I think best ball helps a sport like baseball, where it's like every single day you have to set a lineup, and so like having best ball for baseball, I just imagine is really good. And the reason I bring up baseball is the way I would fix fantasy hockey would be to implement like baseball did, because FanDuel still does it, but I think one thing that DraftKings really does well with baseball is it forces you to pick two pitchers. And I would recommend that on a fantasy level, that hockey embraces the two goalie lineups, just to add more variance into the sport.
That could help.
Because the scoring for a goalie is very similar to the scoring of a pitcher, which would then make it more valuable to have your wings and your forwards and even your defensemen. You know, the defensemen kind of become the tight end, where it's like they're the cheaper of the positions, but if you get it right, you know, or you pay all the way up for your Travis Kelce like defenseman, and there's some strategy behind that. But I think the biggest strategic approach that one of these niche sports could use, like a up and coming fantasy, you know, set like Yahoo just says like, you know what, we're going to redo the whole scoring and we're going to allow a flex position in hockey, or we're going to allow an extra goalie position. That'd be how I would do
it. That might work and be helpful. I could see that.
So do you have anything else before we move on?
No, let's move on to another one.
Let's go.
So you're first. Yep.
What could F1 learn?
It's
F1.
I think F1 could learn a lot from like soccer and FIFA. Honestly, because like they have a lot, like, because F1 has, and I guess NASCAR to a certain extent is already doing this too. Like the one thing F1 doesn't really have that I see is that it's basically just the one F1 league. You have the F1 league and like it races in a few places and that's what it is. At least in NASCAR, you have like trucks and Infinity where the same drivers drive in just different either types of vehicles or different types of races. And I think that's the same thing with soccer. Like you have multiple divisions, you have multiple conferences, but then they can all come together in like a World Cup format of some kind. So it's like all these Grand Prix that I see in F1, it's like, is it really a Grand Prix or is it just another one of the same races that they always have? Like, so I think that they could learn a lot more from like expanding their, what's the term I'm looking for? Their
Well, mine would be talking about expansion would just be expanding their nationality. Like, I don't even care if we're good at it or not, as much as like we don't have a rooting interest for all these things. Like the American, I don't believe there's been an American driver in the F1 since I want to say 2007, and I could be wrong because I'm not the hugest F1 fan. But coming off of the spark of or the phenomenon, because I think it is fair to call it a phenomenon. No one expected it. The phenomenon that Netflix created with F1, which obviously Netflix has some international ties, but like they're really popular in America. Like that is a big market for Netflix. And to not have an American driver, I think is a misrepresentation. Even if an American driver isn't good, it's like not even American, just like have more drivers, embrace different cultures, different ideas, like maybe even have like a Native American, like, or like like break these teams up into more national, pride things. So that way, when you're a young kid and you don't know who to cheer for, it's like you can cheer for a flag. You can cheer for your country, similar to what golf does, which is what we already talked about. Have you got anything to add, buddy?
No, not really. Like I agree with all of that. So like, yeah.
What?
Okay.
You go first.
Okay. So what sport would you take something from to better college football?
The NBA.
What specifically?
The G League. Or the concept of the G League. Where you're not,
so making like Division II college football something more relevant.
or just like not forcing these players to always have to play or put the pressure on them to play in bowl games or to like stay for 3 years. Not to say it like would work out, but like a guy like Leonard Fournette should not be forced to play, right, college football if he needs the money for his family, which he admitted he did need. Like, he would have benefited greatly. And he already had a professional body and was already training to be a professional. Like, it did not work with Clement, some of these other guys. But giving players options and then letting them live with their decisions, I don't think is ever a bad thing. As long as you put the guardrails of like, if you choose this is the consequence, and therefore we have some parameters that we might be able to get you back in, as long as you don't sign with an agency, as long as you don't do these things. So like embracing something like a developmental league would be vital. I'm going to run to the bathroom while you give people the answer. Go ahead, I'll be right back.
All right. So if I'm the NBA or like college football, if I'm going to take something from the NBA, I agree with all of that. So now I'm definitely going to give them more of the player empowerment because that would definitely be helpful. Like I don't see enough of like I'm not a huge college football fan myself. I have my team, but I really don't watch much college football. As much of an NFL fan I am, I do not watch a lot of college football. So if I'm going to make that sport more exciting, I definitely would want to focus more on the matchups. We just don't get like all I ever hear about is Alabama and the SEC. Like I think making an extra division so that you don't have like he said, you don't have to focus on the bowl games. You don't have to focus like help spread everything around the talent. It would work out. But to be fair, like I personally think you need to just start paying college athletes. Like I don't see the reason in amateur sports for anyone that's going to be playing like outside of like high school where it's like, yeah. Even then I'd be more inclined for like high schools to take massive sponsorships so that kids get the equipment and everything they need to play these sports even at that young age. Like I'm not against that.
Yeah, I apologize for the
You're good.
of having to do that, but I just felt like we were having a good conversation. I didn't want to have to end it based on natural causes. Speaking of natural causes, though, I think the naturalness of college football and like the NBA are interesting because like I have a friend, right, that's very traditional, and he's like, oh, college football is ruined with all these people moving conferences and like all of this, and now we're paying players, and it's like, yeah, but you were okay with Jim Harbaugh making $1 billion, You were okay with you paying hundreds and thousands of dollars by the time you went to your parking, by the time you bought the tickets, by the time you traveled. But somebody gets all that money, they get all that revenue. Why don't the players deserve some value, some vitality to that? Like, I'm not saying there is a certain number that would have pleased everyone. Like, obviously, in my line of work, we talk about there's thoughts, right? There's thoughts and then there's feelings. There's emotions and then there's mindfulness. And like, you could say one is more important than the other, but the true honest answer of things is like when the two are melded together, like when the two are functioning together. And I just think that's one thing the NBA does better than any other sport, even better than the NFL, which we might see now with the XFL. But the NFL does a really terrible job of having a developmental league. And so, like, giving these college athletes, and I'll just use college in a general sense to make this point, but giving these college athletes a chance to be like, oh, you can play here for this university and the university pride and the free education, or you can go and play in the CFL and still be qualified to play in the NBA or the NFL. And we're going to embrace that development. I just think, like, as the money grows, as these streaming platforms get more into sports, Apple TV's interested in the Big Ten, for example. Netflix is interested in maybe buying Live Golf, I heard recently. As these different alternative streams become available, I think we also have to be willing to paddle the canoe in a different direction as well,
Right.
And I don't think it's right or wrong. Like, I think it actually helps my friend who's a big Michigan guy who thinks like UCLA going over to the Big Ten is a bad move because it's just a money grab, like we talked about with Live Golf. But it's like, okay, but then if you give these players another alternative, like NBA did with the G League, or even like a guy like Yao Ming or like Jeremy Lin, the NBA has always embraced like these different multicultural kind of phenomenons, like they're not afraid of it. Where college is like, no, we're so rigid. My grandpa played in Nebraska in the 60s, and this is how the Midwestern, running back has to look and like he has to act this way. And it's like, but if you want all that, but then you don't want any personality, like you were saying, like I was still listening. Like I just think you made some really good points. Like you can have both things and they can be separated. As long as, like I say, we have guardrails for these players. Maybe you make it so if they don't sign an agent, they can go back to college if they don't get drafted.
Yes.
But at least give them the options. Like, I'm not saying it would be a wise move for everyone, but like, remember when Andrew Bynum came out and played in the NBA?
Yeah. Okay. Now, yeah.
That worked out mildly well, and I didn't want to use Kobe Bryant because that's like the outlier. That's the Hall of Fame example. But a guy like Kwame Brown probably would have benefited from going to college, where a guy like LeBron James didn't need to. Like, and I just don't understand how the traditional college guy is so against it when it's like the traditional college guy wants that traditional college, that rah-rah guy to get excited about his like mid Tennessee State, football team. But if he's not excited, then why do we got to pretend like he's excited? Like let him go and try to play for the Las Vegas Raiders, in a developmental way. Like I'd be fine with that.
I agree.
So, Gov, we're coming up on an hour. What I would like to do now is kind of preview, because I think this has been a fun conversation. What are some topics or sports or different avenues? And I'm putting you on the spot, I know, and that's kind of the fun of it, is as we put each other on the spot with different sports. But what are some of the topics that you would like to see this podcast cover in the next couple of weeks?
In the next couple of weeks, I'd like for us to have a good strategy best ball talk, at least one podcast, because I'm going to be starting my best ball rankings and looking at everything closely here now that we're getting into August. I would also like to see us sort of give us what's like, along with the best ball talk, I'd also like to do like a whole separate like literal football season talk thing too.
Oh, for sure, we're definitely going to do that. I already have like a barbecue kind of like melting pot idea where we bring on different people of different teams, and we kind of do like a one question about every team from different people we know in different communities. I think that would be really interesting. So like one universal question about the Denver Broncos from our guy Double J, who came in the comments a couple weeks ago, and then like we do a deep dive on that, like, try to find some knowledgeable fans in that way. I actually have one best ball question that would be interesting, I think, to close up shop, and we can kind of preview it as we get into a deeper conversation. I really enjoy best ball, like the idea, the strategy behind it. But at some point, do you think best ball has become like the new mock draft where everyone feels like they have to do one? And so then it becomes like this kind of circusy, gimmicky.
I've seen a lot of crazy best ball drafts, and I
would
say yes.
Where it's like there are some really good content out there where somebody will really break it down. But then there are some like where it's like, oh, you're just doing this strategy to be different. Like, and I don't even want to. I will say an example just to kind of get my point across, but like this is not what I mean. Like, people are like, oh, I'm gonna go 0 running back, or I'm gonna go and I'm gonna only draft quarterbacks, in like round 12 or round 13. So then you're looking at like Wilson and Locke and all these. And it's like, why are we, not to use a pun, but why are we locking ourselves into a strategy before we even draft? Like, how is that good touting? Or like a guy like Pete Overzet, for example, will do these drafts for entertainment. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is people that like will sell you on the strategy before they even enter a draft.
And that's what they go in for. It's like, yeah, that's probably not good. You like really, you need to see where you are in the draft and how the first 2 to 3 rounds go. And then you sort of, at that point, it's like, okay, after knowing that and sort of how people are picking and how this is going, depending on ADP, are there any guys in here reaching for guys already? Or is there any weird picks taken in the first 3? Or is it mostly pretty solid? It's like, okay, well, now I can just look at the 3 picks I ended up getting and go with a strategy from there.
And I'm not saying like again, like Pete Overzet having his boys over for a couple craft beers like Pat Crane or Davis Manning, and like they break open a bottle of wine and they have some good laughs. Like, that's cool. Like that's his own content. What I'm saying though is the guy in the basement that's trying to tell you to go 0 running back is the best strategy, and I'm going to tell you why. And then he spends an hour and a half telling you why, but it's like, yeah, but in your draft, the best value was actually to take Patrick Mahomes, in this slot. But because you were already sold on this idea, you're no longer, taking the best value, which is misrepresenting not only your market, but the people that support you. And I don't ever want to do that. Like, if me and Gub if we did a best ball draft and we said we're just doing it for fun, we can do whatever we want, Gub. But the whole thing is, if you're selling me on a strategy, then don't have fun with it. Sell me on the strategy. Like, you can't. In that sense, I don't feel like you can live both lives.
Right. I agree with that. Like, the strategies are just too, like, I can't believe that. It's just too variant in the best ball way to like have that strategy and just go in and be completely ironside. You're going to do that. It doesn't work from what I've seen. So it's just a bad thought to have. And like more often than not, most of these content, when I watch an overset or someone doing a best ball draft, the best part of the content is when they're trying to do a draft and then they get sniped from a dude who picks a guy that would be crazy that they think. But all it really does is be like, well, that guy needed a receiver. He took a solid receiver. You were going to take the same receiver just 5 picks later or 6 picks later.
Yeah, and what I like about a guy like Overzet is he'll do both. Like they do a lot of fun drafts, but then they also have on their Spotify feed, they actually break down that they do like an FCC best ball draft where they break down each pick round by round for like 30 minutes. And that's like their serious draft where they bet a lot of money and they're taking it super serious. And like, at least you get that transparency between, hey, this is us just shooting the shit for an hour to talk about players. Oh, in this content over here, we're actually like going round by round and telling you exactly why we chose this person, right or wrong. Like this is more a strategic approach. What drives me nuts are the people that act like it's a strategic approach when really they're playing in a dollar contest and trying to convince people that like this is the only way to play. I don't believe in that. So, Gov, this has been a great conversation. Anything else you want to give the people before we get out of here?
No, nothing off the top of my head. I'll keep everyone updated with pool. Right now in this league, we are currently tied for 3rd. So another 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll see if we make the playoffs again and get another shot at cities and the cup and the championships. But again, that's still a few weeks out again.
And again, guys, like and subscribe to the channel. This channel is going to stay free. I'm not going to put anything behind a paywall in terms of our videos. And if I ever did, you'd be the first one to know about it. But I am going to go ahead and put the written content that I'm going to produce behind a paywall just to have some source of value. If you guys chose to support that, that'd be great. It's not needed, but it would be appreciated, obviously, because it would just improve the quality we could do. It would improve a lot of different things. And like by putting value behind it, I'm also saying like I'm going to put value back into it. So like if you subscribe to the newsletter, the free videos get better. The free content gets better. So everyone grows from your garden of success. And that's kind of always been my approach. So this isn't a money grab. This is a growing opportunity. And so as me and Gov go along, I just want you guys to grow with us. So again, have a good night. Stay safe. And hope to talk to you guys soon. Good night.
Peace out, everyone.